What happens when a world-class nutritionist uses blood panels, cellular biology, and fact-based science to create and monitor healthy eating plans with supplements for her clients? Everyone wins. Welcome to Power on Your Plate with Haylie Pomroy, an educational experience that gives you both the actionable and practical tools you can use every day to get your health, weight, and life back on track.
Today, I have an incredible guest. Her name is Corri English. She's been a longtime client of mine, and I've had the privilege to walk through many health journeys with her. Corri is an accomplished and phenomenal musician. She's an entertainer. She's been in Broadway commercials. She's done voiceover work. She just released a new single, and she's got an incredible podcast helping women and moms find health solutions and support for all things that we all go through. So I just want to welcome Corri today and say, Corri, it's such a privilege to have you here. And I am so honored that you're gracing us with your presence today.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited that you're doing this. I can't wait to talk.
We've got lots to go over today. But before we start, I just want to say that Corri is many things in my world. One thing that I'm privileged is she's also been a client of mine for many years. And in my clinic setting, when people come in and they walk through the door, there is nothing that's off the table. We talk about everything from sex life to kids to hormones, financials, you name it. We're really about looking at anything and everything that'll help with health and wellness. But Corri, out of respect for that long relationship that we've had in that clinical setting, I want you to pick a safe word. It can be a food or whatever. It can be number 2, whatever you want. Where if I'm kind of divulging things that you feel like, maybe are a little bit on the confidential side, we can always walk it back.
Oh yeah, let's just make it number 2.
Okay, number 2. And you'll have to share it with our community at some point why that number is so...
Oh yeah, has special meaning.
It's very spiritual. Very spiritual meaning.
Very spiritual.
So Corri, it's funny because I will remember things about clients like, I'll say, wait a minute, you're taking a different vitamin E or that's not the same prescription you had before, or 12 years ago, remember that time when you had that reaction to that cucumber and red wine combination. I will remember all of those things, but I don't remember actually how you came across me and how we started working together kind of professionally.
I found you from an internet search. When I was going through, I was having health issues that I couldn't figure out, and it was ongoing. And I was having that struggle of, is there something wrong with me? Is it in my head? I was going to see my gynecologist, my endocrinologist, because it was all hormonal. Everything that was going on was hormonal. And I'm happy to go as detailed into that as you want. But I had been working, trying to find someone to help me feel better without having to take some kind of a drug or go on the pill. And I found you because I was looking for someone who specialized in fertility, not because I was trying to have a baby at that time, but because I was not having periods.
Right.
And in addition to not having periods, I had talked to one other nutritionist guy who had some pretty extreme tactics. And he had got me into some kind of bad habits. He'd also taught me that I might have an issue with my thyroid, which is good. I did. But he wasn't quite treating it right. It was holistic and that's fine. But there were also some extreme stuff that was creating bad habits for me. And it was taking its toll on me emotionally too. I work in the entertainment industry and there's always a lot of pressure to look a certain way. Right. I love that shifted since we met in so many ways, which is amazing. But in addition to having this pressure to look a certain way, I was kind of at war with my body. And I didn't know why. I was tired all the time. My skin was dry. My eyes were dry. My hair was dry and shedding way too much. I had all these things going on. I just didn't feel right. I was 27 years old and something felt really off to me. And then I thought maybe this is tied into not having periods. And I had gone to 5 different gynecologists who all told me to go on the pill. And the pill is something that I didn't understand because it made me feel bad. And then I wasn't ovulating. So why would I go back on the pill? I was just trying to figure myself out.
Right.
Well, I saw that you specialized in fertility. And I thought that maybe from a food perspective, I could help find some energy, maybe start cycling again. And pretty much the moment I met you, my health just went in a better direction forever.
That's awesome. That's cool. And I wanted to, if you, let's talk about some of the specifics. But one thing that sticks with me, Corri, was I remember you coming into the office, and I remember, thinking you're just like this young, vibrant, beautiful woman that just kept saying, something's not right. But you didn't have a super strong like conviction about I'm not going to do what I'm doing right now. You were a little bit more like, this is what they're telling me to do. And it doesn't feel right, but I don't know a different way. And I remember going, I'm with you, just so you know, like, I don't know that this is the best path for your body. And even stepping away from my opinion on that, I wasn't watching you achieve your wish list, your dream for yourself and for your body. And I remember like once we had that kind of coming together of the minds, it was like I had unleashed a tiger. I mean, it was like, you were like, are you right? Yeah, you were like,
I was all in.
Yeah, you were all in, which is always so fun for me. And it's so exciting to see. But, I remember, we were talking about being on the pill, and that kind of as you were telling me how long you were having difficulty with the periods and what they were doing to try to evoke the periods. And I'm like horrified. I'm going, no. This cherished body that you're walking around with is this, vehicle for creative energy through your music and through your acting and all of that. Like, we have to treat you like an athlete, and we have to nurture you through this process and find out what the heck your body is trying to adapt to so that it can function as well as you actually were. So that was kind of crazy to me. I remember letting you kind of unveil your journey and your path. And I remember feeling a little bit like, no, this is not okay. And then I remember the shift in you. And I do. I remember like dropping stuff off at your house on my way out of town because they travel a lot with clients. I remember the kids running by, my kids running by and dropping stuff off. And we've had kind of a lot and a long journey. And when I was thinking about getting together and talking, and I always want to try to be in service to those other people that are maybe out there, like, you had such a positive outlook, but there was this underlying of you that just was like, this is wrong. And I know it's wrong, but I don't know what else to do. And I really am hoping that as I watched you just like evolve into this powerful person now, advocating for other women's health and mom's health and kids' health. Like, that's why I said I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of you taking your struggle and your journey and how much you're sharing it with other people. So our time here today, like my biggest dream of it all, is that you will help me help all those people out there that maybe they have a small voice or a nagging voice or something that's going on within them that they feel like this isn't right and that there's something off, and that they'll keep searching, and maybe we can provide them some answers or some guidance or some direction. But can you tell me, like, I know you said you weren't having periods and you were having hair loss and stuff. Had you always had problem with periods from when you started, or did that just start at some point? Or share a little bit with everybody about that.
Yeah, of course. I had always had irregular periods, but I was also always really athletic. And so that was always kind of the reasoning behind not having regular periods really ever. And it's actually the reason I went on the pill as like an maybe 18 or 19-year-old, because my periods were so irregular, which is annoying, like you don't know when that's coming. I was dancing and cheerleading, and you kind of want to be able to predict those things.
Right. And I just want to say, just really quick on that, if anybody that's listening, just because you're a high performance athlete does not mean that not having periods is okay. I know that a lot of times practitioners will tell you that, well, you're so lean, or on the other end, you have PCOS and you're carrying extra body weight. Your body's voice telling you that there's something that's not being supported enough for what you're doing, not that what you're doing is causing the dysfunction. So I just want to lead with that for people that are listening. You should have a period.
Yeah. And I'm leaner now than I ever was then. And I lift really, and a lot of this is like you too, like lifting heavy weights, and really, I'm probably in better shape now than I was then. And I cycle perfectly now.
So we've established periods are good.
Periods are good.
And they shouldn't be painful. You shouldn't have leg cramps. We want to have a beautiful, perfect period and should not accept anything less. Okay. We've established
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's why my gynecologist at 18, 19 years old or whatever put me on the pill.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was on the pill, I think for 12 years. I
Mm-hmm.
went off for a short time, maybe 6 years in, because I wanted to see what my body would do if I
Right.
came off of it. And I also think I
Right.
had some of those like side effects that were probably more like I was eating a bunch of junk food at college, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
probably what it was. But when I went off the pill, I was off it for like 6 months and didn't have a period. And so my gynecologist put me right back on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it wasn't until, oh gosh, it was probably in my mid 20s when I really started to feel like I didn't have a lot of energy. You know, people a lot of times attribute weight gain and like your ability to lose weight with hypothyroidism, but that
Right.
was probably one of the more minimal things. It was like maybe like a 5 pound issue. It wasn't
Right.
like I was overweight, but I did work in the entertainment industry and I realized that where other people seem to be able to have some kind of formulaic way to lose weight,
Right.
that didn't work for me. And where other
Right.
people could go on vacation and eat whatever they wanted and then come back and like lose
Get
the
back
water
on it.
weight,
Yeah. Yeah.
that wouldn't happen for me. I was stuck with it.
Yeah. It was easier for you to gain weight than it was to lose weight. I remember
That's right.
that being really defining. You were like, if I work my butt off, I can,
I would
yeah.
Yeah, I would have people go, like, when they found out how much I worked out, they would go, "Oh, really?" And
Mm-hmm.
that's not the response you want. It felt like all of this work, I was just killing myself. And ultimately, I was doing my body a disservice and really making the problem worse by undereating and overexercising. But I didn't know that until I met you.
And then I fed
So,
you. I was like, no,
yeah.
no, no, no,
And
no,
then you
no.
fed me. And I trusted you so quickly. Well,
Oh,
first and foremost, I feel like when I met you, you were like a soul sister. Like you
oh,
just
of
are
course.
this ball of positivity and light. Like you walk in the room and you immediately like just feel good. And that's
No.
just who you are as a person. So I feel like I connected with you really quickly just on like a person to person level. Like I just like this person.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I really remember is that when I came to you and I told you I was having, like, I kind of gave you a rundown, and you said, I can help you, but I can only help you so much. You have an issue with your thyroid, and what you really need is to see a thyroid specialist. And so you could have given me a ton of other information and just had me continue coming back to you, but that's not what you told me. You're like, come back to me or don't, but like, I can only do so much to help until this is fixed. And then you told me where to go to help me with the problem that I needed more help with. And I immediately thought like, wow, this is someone I can trust. And that I think solidified me being like all in for anything you ever told
What are
me.
we doing next? What are we doing next?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you brushed on talking about the thyroid piece, and when you say like soul sister, I was like, and again, I feel a lot of proud moments with you, but I remember I think you were in like Hellcats, and I was like, okay, she cannot be a kitten, she needs to be a tiger. Like we are going like for maximum here. But a lot of times the thyroid is so overlooked and it's only looked at, like you said, from maybe a weight gain perspective, maybe cracked heels, maybe thinning of the eyebrows. You know, we were looking at some things, the quality of the hair that we were kind of talking
Body
about.
temperature.
Yeah, so we did some
Yeah.
body temperature checking, and I knew that I wanted to help you create a team. All of my life, I believe that I have a clinic without walls, which means that I want to listen and learn from you and your body and then create the best team that we can put together to unleash that tiger. And so remember, as we talked about the thyroid, there was some medications that were being used that weren't really addressing how you metabolize the thyroid. And we looked at reverse T3 and we looked at TSH and T3 and T4 and uptake also. And getting that really dialed in. And I'm fortunate, and it's been through, gosh, 20 years ago, I was kicking down doctors' doors. Now I'm having a hard time returning all the texts all day
I bet.
because there's so much more embraced in really looking at the whole body. And also, like, I'm not satisfied until you're satisfied and then some, right? With your
Yeah.
health. I want you to be outrageously healthy. And so the thyroid was a really important piece. And in our community, I help people prepare for doctor's appointments. And I remember I actually called ahead when you were going to see the gentleman that I sent you to. And
Yep.
I really conveyed to him, like, even just energetically, close your eyes when she walks through the door and expect greatness when she walks out the door, because she's going to be deceiving in the sense that you're a knockout and you're a bundle of energy. And so I think so many times people get, there's people that, the same thing, individuals that really struggle with their weight. And there's a lot of judgment around, I literally had a client that called me and said, she's really early on in our time together, and I sent her in for this physical, and they literally wrote hamburgers no more than once a week and ice cream once a month. I swear.
Wow. Oh God, that's heartbreaking.
And there was so much judgment around that the activity wasn't getting her what she wanted out of her body, as opposed to she wasn't getting the support she needed. And on your case, I remember calling the doctor and saying, look, you're going to see this beautiful woman, but you have to realize she's not having periods. Her care quality is poor. Her energy level isn't. And as we get a little older, like myself, we go, energy level, like
what's that? But this was 3 children,
yes. But that's what I'm saying. I know this particular gentleman doctor, and I'm like, I know that you would maybe covet her level of energy, but I'm telling you, she's at 30%. She's at 30% when we get these periods going. So I just want to encourage people to look at the thyroid really holistically, because that did make a significant difference. And then with your body, we needed to reset the metabolic pathways. And I'll never forget, it was a pathway that we were looking at specifically called cytochrome P450. And it's how the body takes lipids and it converts it into the master hormone, pregnenolone, and how then that master hormone distributes equally estrogens, progesterones, testosterones, glucocorticoids, mineral corticoids, and vitamin D. And I remember having that aha moment with your body where I was like, okay, the distribution's off, and that's why she's not mounting that spike with progesterone, and she's not naturally cycling and having a period. That same pathway cleaves the thyroid hormone as we secrete it from the thyroid gland, and it breaks it down so that it can actually fit into the receptor sites. So like they kept saying, well, she doesn't have a diseased thyroid, and it's not that the output is there. And I kept going, it's that she's not metabolizing it efficiently. And it's the same way when we got our first baby together, when we got the periods regular, and then we were able to
make a baby.
Have
our baby. My baby by Haylie.
I'm sitting in my office right now, and I literally have his ultrasound picture on my desk. Just so you know.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that so much.
I'm his first love and his first stalker. No, you're his first love. I'm his first stalker. Anyway, I love that baby, and I love other baby too. But just like when we take a step back and I look at your health and your journey, and now you're like icing on the cake and decorating the cake. I mean, there's so much more that you're doing in health and wellness and in your body and helping other women, which is fabulous.
I think what you touched on with so I think a really important thing that I would love to share is just how hard it was for me to realize I had to take accountability for my own health. What one doctor says, you can't necessarily take as gospel. So if you feel like something else is going on, sometimes you have to do your own research. And now sometimes that annoys doctors. Right. and I get it, right? But like some doctors love an educated patient and some are like, oh, here we go. And then there's also like, there's plenty of people who I'm sure just read something on Google and their doctors were rolling their eyes. But in my case, I'd had several different gynecologists wanting to put me on the pill, and they didn't have a good argument for why. Like in my head, I'm like, well, what happens when I go off the pill and I want to have babies and then I'm not ovulating? What happens then? Oh, well, then we put you on a medication that's going to make you ovulate.
Right.
And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'd heard horror stories about those drugs. And I'd literally had a friend tell me I had never felt like I never understood suicide till I was on that drug. I'm like, wow. And so then I went and I did some more. I had been to this other nutritionist for a while who, without it really being coming from like a compounded pharmacy, like what I take now is, it was like a porcine thyroid, like desiccated porcine thyroid that was T4 and T3. And I did feel a little bit better on it, but I still did not feel right. I almost felt like edgy energy.
Right.
I felt like kind of jittery energy, like I'd had coffee and then I would crash. So I did my research. I knew that wasn't quite right. And I found an endocrinologist in LA who seemed to be this like young doctor who was like on the cutting edge of research. And I had this experience where I was running late. So I was like running, huffing and puffing, had run all the way across like the Cedars like parking lot. And when I got there, they took my temperature and it was 96 degrees. And I said to the nurse, like, is that normal? And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. Well, from doing some...
I was just going to say, what's breaking my heart right now in this space is that they just came out and said, it's okay to have a low body temperature. And I just went, no.
I was always cold. My feet were cold. My hands were cold. I was always cold. And so they told me, oh, don't worry about that. It's fine. So then I asked the doctor to test my iodine levels.
Yeah.
And he said, no one's iodine is ever low. It refused to test it. And then after speaking to me, he did test my TSH, which showed up in the normal range. And he said, at 27 years old and somebody like in the prime of my like career, he told me that really his prescription for me was to sleep more and stress less.
Right.
And that's the point at which he took me off of the desiccated porcine, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, thyroid medication, just ripped me off of it. Armor. That's right. Yep. So literally like just ripped me like cold turkey off of it. And I was in the middle of doing a workshop of a musical out in New York. And so, New York, it's like this vibrant city and I was working these long hours and doing and I felt so horrible. I would sleep for 12 hours a night and wake up and feel like I could barely get out of bed. I actually wasn't hungry. And in addition, it was like the worst I'd ever felt. It was like worse than before anything.
That's
because
crazy.
then I just been, and that's when I was like, well, maybe at the very least I can eat in a way that will help me have more energy.
What are you taking for your thyroid now?
I take a compounded T3 and T4. Initially, I was on T3. Basically, when I went to the doctor that you sent me to, they drew a crazy amount of blood. But even right there in the office, they tested my iodine, which was almost nothing.
Yes, I remember that distinctively.
That's right. And they tested my reflexes, which I had no idea were slow. They were. And they tested and they took my body temperature. Yep. And I walked out of there with I believe it was like 10 micrograms of T3 because, the doctor said to me, I don't know exactly what dose you need to be on, but I know that you have low thyroid. And he drew a diagram of my thyroid for me and showed me how it worked.
Right.
And I walked out of there and sat in my car and bawled my eyes out because I felt heard.
Yeah.
And I knew that everything was going to be fine. And it was he in tiny little increments raised it until it was regulated, which it has been like give or take. And we put a little T4 in there when I was pregnant to support my bone density. Yeah. And even just recently, it was so like we lowered 5 micrograms and I could feel that it was like got a little low. That's how specific it is. Yeah. It's so specific. Yeah. It's crazy.
And that was the thing with you and we checked for the methylated, whether you had the MTFHR and the thing for you and in your body is T4. So I don't know if you know how T4 turns into T3. You actually cleave an iodine molecule. So T4 stands for 4 iodines. So you release an iodine molecule into the bloodstream and that makes it now T3. And so you were so deficient in iodine. And iodine deficiency and thyroid deficiency when you have a normal TSH. Remember, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It is not a thyroid hormone. It is a pituitary hormone that tells the thyroid to be active. So if your thyroid is actually producing enough, but you're not cleaving that iodine off, letting it go back and nurture the thyroid gland, and now you have T3 that can now activate cellular energy, then your brain will produce more thyroid. So you're going to have a totally normal TSH. So with your body, we had to stair step. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was actually 5 micrograms that we started the T3. And again, this was...
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I just remember it was like the lowest dose I could have possibly had, but it was something.
Right. And what we would do is we would go up 5 micrograms at a time until we got your receptor sites saturated with enough T3. Then we put in some glandular-based T4 and worked through that ratio. And again, to your point, when we got pregnant, then we had to modify that again. And so another thing that we do in our community is we create a health wish list. And what Corri doesn't realize maybe is that those health wish lists that I use in my online community were created by the questionnaires that I ask my clients in the office. And so like, Corri, if I go through your chart, which I have,
I know,
I'm going to cry. And I remember, and I was going through and I'm looking at it like, you were like, I just want to have periods, like normal periods.
I just want to be a real girl.
I just want to be a real girl. Yeah, I'd have that happen someday. But for me, especially with the craft that you and the profession that you're in, and in Chinese medicine, I mean, that's creativity. That's the ability to create and to manifest. And I just remember like looking at that. And I just remember like, and I did, I'm going to screenshot it for you. You can put it on your desk. But I like circled it and circled it and circled it because I'm like, okay, this can't be okay. And the adaptation that happens in our adrenal glands and in our hormones and the biofeedback loops require what we call a protocol for progress, right? So it's a progression of evolving the body back into a state of balance. So you can't just you can, but if you're not feeling well, don't allow someone to talk you into having a TSA checked and then not rechecking it for 2 or 3 years. When we were remodeling the pathways, the metabolic pathways for your hormones, we were rechecking those regularly. And in the glandulars, I'm a big advocate for the naturally compounded thyroid. And it's hard. I have clients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis where they're reactive to T4 that are on Synthroid, which is a synthetic T4. And we have to beg and plead and twist arms with the wrong doctor sometimes. And I'm above begging and pleading. And I'm not a big arm twister physically, but I'll send pears and, flowers. I'm not above that. But to get someone with Hashimoto's on Cytomel or naturally compounded T3, and I'm just going, oh my gosh, the science of it. So in all of this that you've kind of gone through, and now we have had lots of conversation about a lot of time, our time together is formulating how we're going to integrate another practitioner, even with the kids, right? Like when the vaccine conversations started happening, or when introduction of food conversation started happening, what to eat while you're breastfeeding, like all of those things are about putting power in your body by nutrients and rebalancing the metabolism. And so we've kind of been through a lot of different life events. And that's what I just, and again, kind of in prepping for this, I just went back, and on our website, when we do the health wish list, it comes from me asking clients questions for years and years and years. And when you say, like, I just want to have a period, and I'm going, oh my gosh, no, you want so much more. You want all the things that happen when you don't have a period to manifest themselves within your body as well.
Yeah. I didn't know what I was, you don't realize what you are missing until you have that back.
What do you think the biggest myth or line of bullcrap or whatever you want to call it, what do you think the biggest myth that you believed about health before you pivoted in your health journey? What do you think the biggest thing, whether it's the gremlin in your head that, you got to exercise so much, or the doctor's always right, or your parents are always, what do you think the biggest myth that was dispelled and lifted a weight for you?
The biggest thing for me when I met you was feeding my body. Feeding myself. How ridiculous is that? You shouldn't be starving all the time. You don't need to not eat. You need to eat. You need to eat. And I was so terrified to eat. And one of the first things you did was you put me on a 10-day optimal cleanse. Was that right?
Yeah.
And I remember it being so nourishing because my body was totally weirded out by carbs because I'd taken them out of my diet for so long.
Right.
And I can remember eating tomato soup and broccoli.
Yeah.
It's leading up to some kind of a roll that I had to dress a certain way. There was no protein in there, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And I was so terrified.
You and I have the bagels. I wanted you to have sprouted bagels, and you were like, "What?" I'm like,
it felt so indulgent.
I promise you, we're going to be okay. And you were like, "There is no way I can eat this much." And it's people say, "You had me at hello." I knew I had you at bagel. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. But the optimal cleanse, I didn't lose weight, but I stayed the same on this diet that was very nourishing. I loved the shakes and the food and I believe it was you kind of work your way up to a bunch, all shakes in the middle, but there's food on either side. It's like a little pyramid, right? Is that right?
Absolutely.
And I just remember feeling so nourished and feeling like this is so much food, and I didn't gain weight. And that was a big deal for me because at the time with my low thyroid, I could just gain weight by looking at a bagel.
Right. And, it's funny because a lot of people do the cleanse to lose weight and to ignite their metabolism. And I'm so excited and thrilled and clean their palate and all of this. But I actually developed that formula and that program when one of my best girlfriends was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she was what they call Herceptin receptor positive, fish test positive. And they could not get her. She had tried Arimidex and tamoxifen, which are estrogen inhibitors, blockers, and they could not get her body to basically detox efficiently her estrogens. And I remember I was, the biochemistry brain of mine and the food scientist. I just put together this like protocol and this program and these nutrients and ratioing everything. And it's kind of funny because we have like all these baggies and, I was pulling stuff together, and that's how I actually formulated that. So it's become really popular to stimulate the metabolism, and it's become super popular to like kickstart people's bodies. But it's to your point, it's about eating a lot of food, having a lot of nutrients, and it's really about working on the body's ability to convert fat to fuel, which is hormones. Like a lot of people don't recognize and realize that we manufacture all of our sex hormones from fat. And so that's the building blocks for our sex hormones. So if we're not metabolizing that, whether it's the thyroid, whether it's estrogens or progesterones, we're not able to have that imbalance and that homeostasis. So I do remember, the other thing I remember, like also really working on not fasting before going fast, meaning I was working a lot on having you eat for the level of exercise that you were doing. I remember backing you off exercise a little bit for a moment. And then
it was so hard for me to do that, but I could never have the results in terms of like body composition and like the shape of my muscles with all the cardio I was doing. Like the cardio, like stop the cardio, like the cardio. If I could get back all the hours I spent on the elliptical, which was, again, that was bad advice from a trainer back in Atlanta who told me I had muscles under there, that I needed to do 60 minutes of cardio a day or more. And if I was going to miss a day, I had to bank them.
Yeah.
And it created this, it was so stressful to me if I missed that time that I would be on vacation. And if I hadn't banked those minutes, I was so intent on getting that time in. I was so lucky that I didn't ever suffer from an eating disorder on a clinical level. But man, I had some really unhealthy behaviors mentally and physically.
Right. Well, on the other side of this mountain, you are like being an incredible advocate for your kids and for your family. I've watched like both of the boys consuming, because I stalk you too, on all of your social media. Both of those boys consuming, just the most freshest, beautiful, incredible foods and smoothies. You make this nutritionist mama so proud as you're establishing that in their bodies. And I remember, like we talked about first foods and kind of what to incorporate. It's sometimes when people go through stress or trauma, it's when they come out the other side, they would like to make it all go away. I really commend you for pulling it all forward into your wealth of knowledge and experience and sharing it on your podcast. I mean, your podcast is like, again, I did have a very strong stint in the fertility world. I worked for ASRM and VR Pharmacy. I worked with the top fertility doctors in Beverly Hills. And one of the things that I wished that so many of those moms and so many of those women that were going through this would to have had a platform like you guys are doing. So it's really awesome and it's very cool. You have me right now. If you wanted to ask me anything, either on behalf of yourself, the kids' health, or something that you think someone out there would love to hear, what do you want to ask me?
Oh my gosh, I could come up with a list a mile long. The pressure. Okay, well, I'll ask you something that's like pretty personal to my family. And I think this might be something that can be pretty relatable to a lot of people right now, because with everything that's been going on in the world this year with this pandemic, and then the trickle down effect of just the pressure that people are under, the isolation, I think it probably affects people's anxiety levels.
Right.
And my husband suffers from anxiety.
Right.
And I would love to know how to help him and then help other people who suffer. He suffers from it quietly. He internalizes it. And I know he's not one of those people who outwardly gets really edgy and snappy. That's like more me, right? But
someone has to own that space. I'm just saying.
That's right. I'm just, yeah, exactly. But he internalizes it. It's all going on inside. And then on the outside, he's this incredibly calm. And he's just like the most lovely. I don't know how I got him to marry me. Like he is the most lovely human, the most kind human. I love him. I'm obsessed with my husband. I'm just going to say it. Like, I feel like I'm allowed because he married me. Like I'm allowed to also be his stalker,
There you go. Yes.
In fact, the working from home is like horrible for him because I just won't leave him alone. I'm like, oh, hi, what you doing? Hi, which I'm sure just raises his anxiety more. He's like, I am working. I'm going to work.
You defined the cause of his anxiety. Got it.
Exactly. But he has always had very big, sort of high pressure jobs and also killed it at those jobs. And so that he also has been diagnosed with like clearly mild to moderate OCD. That I believe he went to Vanderbilt, but they said when it was younger, it was probably moderate. And he's just really sort of used some of those tendencies and kind of leaned into them in a way that make him very productive, which I commend him for. But the anxiety can really spike up at times. And I would just love to know how I can help him kind of just like take the edge off. And then I feel like a lot of people are probably going through that right now.
Right, for sure. So there's kind of some things that, let's go like big picture and then we'll distill it down a little bit. So a lot of times with anxiety, especially when we have a coupled picture or piece of OCD stuff, from a nutritional perspective, we try to encourage vasodilation as much. So what I mean by that is an increase in blood flow. And there's a couple reasons why. When people feel anxiety, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, sometimes people talk about a tightening of the chest, a tightening of the throat, a feeling of constriction. And there are certain hormones that are secreted that create constriction. And then on a mental emotional aspect of it, there is with the diagnosis with OCD specifically, there is a constriction of some sort of behavioral pattern, right? So you can see everything from hyper organization, you can see hyper cleanliness. I mean, there's a lot of ways that those will manifest. But one thing that we forget sometimes is that those all have a hormone component. All of our emotions do, right? And hormones travel through the bloodstream, and hormones are detoxified through the bloodstream, unlike other tissues in the body, right? They're delivered, their mode of transportation is through the blood. So with individuals that are stressed, we do heated foods. So like not ice water,
interesting.
room temperature water.
He loves cold beverages. Everybody else loves their like tea or, and he's all about the cold drinks. So that could be not helping.
But it's like a kid that has food allergies that craves the food that they're allergic to.
Oh,
so if an individual that has anxiety, that has some sort of constriction, so even swimming in a pool as a child, like a lot of times people will say, oh my gosh, he loved the snow, or he liked ice drinks, or he always ordered a snow cone, right?
Or wants to keep the air on 64 all the time.
Air on 64. So that's because when you do something that's a catalyst for your anxiety physiologically, your body creates natural endorphins and epinephrine to respond to that. So you get a little hit from it, actually.
Wow.
So the way to create that, so he can, ideally I'd like him to not have ice water, quite frankly. But, I don't want to stifle his joy and pleasure if that's where he's getting it from right now. But what we want to do is try to have moments or times where he can intentionally secrete the hormones of vasodilation. So like, it's going to sound a little counterintuitive, but like even from a supplement perspective, I know you've taken like the Metabolism Energy before. It has a lot of the nitric oxide, which promotes vasodilation. So he could do that as a cold beverage because it would counterbalance the restriction in the ice. If he's not into the hot teas, anything that has a spicy aspect to it. So we need a lot of hot, spicy foods for him. But even like if I envision him, I always envision people as a little kid whenever they're in my office. And I say, okay, their constitution was their constitution long before X, Y, and Z manifested. And what would nurture their constitution most efficiently? So I think of like hot baths, I think of warm socks, I think of warm compresses. But as an adult, oftentimes we survive off of those surges, those epinephrine hits, it's almost like getting an EpiPen, right? Like those hits that we get that push us past our imbalance. We'll call the anxiety manifesting as a metabolic imbalance, right? So the cold will give him a hit to push through it. What I'd like to do is give him more reserve. So if you can get him soups, if you can puree things, pureed soup, spicy teas, even if he does an iced tea, if he can do a chai tea iced or something that evokes that
That has the spice.
vasodilation. Yeah. And, dry skin brushing, massage, like those all, maybe those would be more enticing than something. And then the other thing is minerals are really important with both anxiety and OCD. So a lot of people are doing like bone broths and stuff like that. That's a traditional, both in Native American, in many, many cultures, they've used bone broths for centuries. Things that are very strong in minerals would be another one that's really important. And I'm not sure, but from a protein perspective, if you can talk him into it, he'd metabolize the game meats a little bit better. So the buffalo, the elk, the venison, if he's into that at all, turkey over chicken, those kinds of things that you'll notice a little bit of subtle support for. With OCD and anxiety, the receptor sites in the neurotransmitters, really a nice probiotic is really important. And again, we see this in kids. We see it so effective, right? We give them a little bit of hot soup, a little bit of hot tea, a little bit of probiotics, and their body has more reserve to deal with it when it comes up. And then
I think he's just doing everything wrong.
Well, that's awesome, actually, because if he
makes it an easier fix.
If he were doing everything quote unquote right and was still feeling not as in control of it as he would like to be, we'd have to search for maybe dig a little bit deeper. With male children, and I know you have 2 boys, male children and men in general, with any anxiety and OCD, you want to really be aware of the way the body cleaves testosterone. And we see it even before puberty in children, in male children, and especially again when we see OCD manifesting in little kids. A lot of times we'll see a lot of candida or fungus. So we'll have little kids that come into the clinic and they'll have had maybe long stints of antibiotics, maybe when they were little or something, and their flora is off. And a good 90 days on a strong and potent probiotic, you'll see a lot of shifts in there. The other piece with, like I said, with the hormones, with the hormone receptor site, if he went in and had his testosterone level checked, it might be 400 to 800, and you're like, woohoo! But you've got to look at sex-binding hormone globulin and metabolize testosterone to make sure that the receptor sites are there. The receptor sites are active. If not, so when we have people that are having anxiety, especially coupled again with the OCD tendencies, sometimes we'll use DIM, D-I-M, to help wash the receptor sites and make that more viable.
I was on that.
Yeah.
I was on that for a bit.
Yeah. So DIM helps the body. So, I talked about how you cleave the hormones. DIM works really good to, like, if you imagine a soccer field and there's a net and there's a goalie standing in front of the net, DIM gets rid of the goalie. And it lets the hormone travel into the net and be received more successfully.
Wow. That's great to know about the kids, because I try to keep an eye, particularly on Radley, during this time. And he just said to me, this is the only sign I've ever seen of anything, but he wasn't listening at one point. And then he said to me, well, I did it because sometimes I have to do things a certain number of times. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I did that when I was a kid too. My mom swears that she, through discipline techniques, stopped me. I was like, I need to flip the light switch a certain number of times. So these poor kids, I mean, really, like, sorry, kids.
They're so fortunate. They're so fortunate. They're so fortunate. That's a great question. And it's really cool that you're in tune with that with your family. And I know it's like, I heard of this really cool analogy in relationship. And it talked about a lot of times women, like in a baseball field, women are like the catcher. They see the entire field. And this is not, I'm going to use not women, maybe head of household, right? In the sense of the person that's embodying the foundation of the house, the foundation maybe of the kids or something. And that the other partner can be like the pitcher. They really see this, a badass having tons of success and he's looking down. And it's really cool that you're right now at this point in your relationship, seeing the entire field and looking at the family holistically as opposed to individual, because that's why women cycle together when they live in the same houses together. We all engage with our hormones without even touching each other all the time. So that's really cool.
How crazy is that? It's so interesting. And I try to approach everything. Some of the prescriptions you've given me, I have shared so much information with people. And I really credit you with so much of, my life was changed from the moment I walked in the door to meet you. And I see so many people, if someone hears me mention like a thyroid thing, all of a sudden I'm like in an hour conversation. And one of the saddest things I see, one of the saddest things is when somebody asks me a ton of questions and then doesn't actually take their health into their own hands. And then they're like, oh, well, I ended up like trying
Doing
blah, blah,
keto.
blah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And that happens.
right.
And then
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'm still not feeling well. And I'm like, okay, well, remember that other thing I told you should do?
Yeah.
Like, so
It's a trip for sure. And it's crazy because like we've talked about, like, I was single for a period of time in my life. And I remember going to dinner, and I've always been, just like a body freak, right? Like, I want to know why and what your bowel movements are like. And I mean, I'm just
oh,
a body
totally.
freak. I'm
Yep.
obsessed
I remember when I
with
met you, you were like, I have so many pictures of people's poop on my phone.
no. Oh
She's
no,
like,
I
I
don't do that. I
don't.
think
Do you have a safe word? See, do you have a safe word, Haylie? You might need your safe word.
no. Everything I'm like, sacred. No, it is funny though, because I've been probably trying to put you at ease. I'm like, tell me anything, show me anything. You should see how many. Yeah, no, I've been totally obsessed. And I remember we went to dinner, and I didn't know, but apparently the people that we were with were like trying to set me up with somebody. And we're walking out, and he's like, really, Haylie? Really? You had to start talking about periods and bowel movements? And I'm like, and I'm like, your wife was like, you and I, he's like, yeah, I know more about my wife's anatomy and physiology than I ever wanted to know. We've been married 20 years and had 3 kids. And I'm like, well, and then I was oblivious. I had no idea, but I'm always fascinated. And I'm like, so now my brain, like talking about Ty, I'm like, oh, so fascinating. And I just encourage, like, when someone comes to you in your family, or the kids come to you and they're like having a health problem or a health struggle, I always say, instill, like, gosh, that's fascinating. I wonder what your body's trying to tell us. Right. And like,
Yeah.
with Ty's anxiety, it's like, this is so fascinating. I wonder what his body's trying to tell us. And he needs a little spicy, is what it's saying, a little spicy.
Okay.
That's my prescription. That's my food prescription.
He does like spicy stuff. Go,
Good.
like if it literally will burn his tongue off, great.
Good. I love to hear that. Okay, tell me, do you guys have a favorite recipe, a favorite fast metabolism recipe? Or do the kids have something favorite that they love for you to make them?
Well, one of the things you helped me with, I am not a person who loves to cook. I'm not a good cook. And one of the things you helped me with was doing things while I'm traveling and things when I'm working like crazy, because I have so many friends who just like make your recipes constantly. And your recipes are amazing. One of my favorite recipes still is is it the 3-day? I'm trying to remember. It's one of the burn recipes. And it's like this, I'm sure it's in like all like, but that's the book that I associate it with is the sweet potato. It's like the ground turkey and then the like carrots, and it's like a pot pie, but it's like the sweet potatoes on top.
Yeah.
Oh my, the shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pie. Oh my gosh, that shepherd's pie is like out of this world.
Right. That's comfort food too. And it's so funny that you say that, because that is actually in one of the hormone therapies, the hormone remedies, recipes. It's a prescription for like hormone balance. So I love that you crave that, because it nurtures you.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Any other questions for me? And you don't have to have one.
Oh, are you kidding me? Like, I'm just trying to choose which question I want to ask you. That's the hard part for me. Okay, so here's a personal one, because, I just like love getting personal, because I feel like the more we can talk about stuff people don't talk about. So since having my babies, I have just cycled like clockwork, like in the way that my periods were always irregular before having babies. Like after I have my babies, like the little guy now is going to be 2 in August. And I nursed him for about 16 months, and then he was done with me. I was a little hurt by it. I was like, no, you're my last baby. I was going to nurse you till you were 16. And then I was like, no, that's weird. That's weird. Okay, 2.5, 3. Like, anyway, so I immediately started having periods again, like clockwork. But the weird thing is now I'm having more painful ovulation.
Interesting.
And it's like almost feels more PMSy at ovulation than it does when I start my period. I'm not sure if that could be like an ovarian cyst or like something that's flaring up during that time, but I'm definitely having more like crampiness, bloatiness, like a little bit of like, it literally feels like period cramps, but it's at ovulation.
Right. So, I mean, there's a couple great things to check, which is your LH and your FSH, right? Follicle stimulating hormone. Again, this is a pituitary hormone. And LH is a luteinizing hormone, which is what actually stimulates the egg to kind of be released. Those are, as we're rechecking you and we keep you really dialed in and stuff, those are really good things to check and just make sure that those levels are staying healthy and normal. Sometimes FSH can, especially when individuals are having a lot of ovulation pain, we look at pituitary pushing really hard on the ovary to stimulate the follicle, and it causes inflammation in the tissue. And that inflammation really can create kind of a discomfort, a warming, and for sure, a great ultrasound to see for ovarian cyst is never a bad idea, right? It's not invasive to the point, it's not, medicine, it's not anything like that. It's just a simple diagnostic. It's really easy to check. So that's not a bad one. But if we have that, even if it's ovarian cyst, we want to understand again kind of why. Sometimes post nursing, our body's candida or yeast can flourish in the body. So even if you aren't prone to like a vaginal yeast infection, you want to look for things like coating of the tongue, rashing on the back of the arms at all. Of course, any dry or flaky skin. Are any of those things happening?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So usually if it's yeast or candida response, those kind of like
show themselves.
And so the fact that those don't, that I'm not saying, totally table that, but I'm saying that I would kind of go through maybe my 3, usually what happens, and look at that. The other is we have some area of inflammation in the body. So you can have a sore joint or a sore muscle, or you're working out really hard or really heavy and you're having a hard time replenishing afterwards. So as long as we have kind of like the yeast idea off the table, what we'll usually do is really increase the fruit. So like even a phase 1 intensive coming into ovulation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so what happens is you can do that. There's the pain and inflammation protocol too, but usually when I'm wanting to elevate the glycemic value pre-ovulation, and it usually takes 4 cycles to get it totally resolved because we usually ovulate left, right, right? We don't ovulate on the same, we typically, unless there's some aspect of dysfunction, we ovulate on one side, then the other side, and one side, then the other side. So usually going through 2 cycles of each ovary, so that's why it takes kind of a time, really can help create and reduce kind of that inflammation there. So my suggestion would be to look at like the phase 1 intensive, and look at doing that for 5 to 7 days prior to ovulation. And see if that doesn't just reset that. It's really supportive for the what they call the triple warmers. So that's the thyroid, the pituitary, the thyroid, and the ovaries, right? So we have that hormone feedback loop that happens in that triple warmer, that style of eating as we surge to ovulate can really help it not feel so dysfunctional.
Okay. Well, I like fruit. So you've given me fruit prescriptions for other things too. So I love the fruit prescription.
Right. So look at the phase 1 intensive or the phase 1 super intensive. You can download the whole program on the website and have all the food lists and all of that. But I would just play a little bit with that. And then what I would do during that time is look at in the iBurn book, go to the iBurn section. Play with that tea and look at the success boosters in the iBurn. And layer that together. And then you need to let me know because now I'm just gonna, And then, like I said, an ultrasound for an ovarian cyst is pretty darn non-invasive. And I know this is not the time to go to the doctors, but a pretty easy thing to schedule and get in. And it's pretty easy for them to see that. And if for any reason there were ovarian cysts, I would immediately suggest from a food perspective that you did the 10-day fast metabolism cleanse. You have not done one in a long time. You have not needed to do one. But that can really help reestablish not why we, in your body, why we would produce a cyst, really help nurture those pathways so that you didn't do that. I'm leaning a little more because you came off nursing to the middle option. It doesn't sound like candida to me, but usually it's one of those 3.
Well, I'm only about 3 cycles in after 2.5 years of no periods. So I also have been kind of trying to give myself a minute to just, for my body to kind of like kickstart.
No, you're not a pussycat. You're a tiger. I want badass perfection. I want ovulation.
I love you.
Swinging from the chandeliers.
Like, this is the best thing ever.
And periods where you're, blossoming with creativity. Expect, like, again, I love what you just said because it's so honest. Like, nursing is such a change, an adjustment, and an adaptation to the body. But I want you to nurse and to stop nursing and to get pregnant and to not have babies or have babies and feel outrageously healthy through all of it.
Well, you have helped me have an outrageously healthy life in general. So I am very appreciative of that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I just love being able to talk through this. And I know that it's going to inspire and help other people. And I'm honored to have gotten to walk on this journey with you. I am so proud of all the people whose lives you touched through your art, through your craft, through your music, through your podcast. And it's just a privilege to know you.
I feel the same way. I absolutely adore you.
Kiss that family for me, please. And then do it again for me one more time.
I will.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, Haylie.
What a really cool call we just had with Corri English. She's been a client of mine for a long time. And before doing this call with her, I actually pulled up her chart, and it was really kind of humbling that I got to see all the different things that we've been through together on our health journey. And, as she talked about her family and her husband, I'm really hoping that you found some common ground and some takeaways that can really encourage you to take nothing but excellence when it comes to your health, to expect nothing but being outrageously healthy. There's always a way to put power on your plate. I want you to have the solutions that you deserve and just the answers that I know you need to go forward on your own personal health journey. Make sure that you become a member of my website. You can always try it for 30 days for free, and that you participate in all the challenges that we have to offer. I'm doing everything that I can to take the experiences that I have with my clients and in our clinic and extend all of their successes and stressors and trials and tribulations and moments of struggling and moments of thriving, and share that with you so that you can have the health that you deserve. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure that you check out all of our upcoming challenges so that you can get on your journey to health with me.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of Power on Your Plate with Haylie Pomroy. Please remember to share the amazing science and tools with someone you love. The more we know, the more we all lift our global health together. Visit www.hayliepomroy.com to get notes from today's show and to take your education and health to a new level of success and happiness.
Information on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for the advice provided by your physician or other healthcare professional, or any information contained on or in any product label or packaging. You should not use the information on this podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease, or prescribing any medication or other treatment. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professional before taking any medication or nutritional, herbal, or homeopathic supplement, or adopting any treatment for a health problem. If you have or suspect that you have a medical problem, promptly contact your healthcare provider. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking professional advice because of something you've heard on this podcast. Information provided on this podcast and the use of any products or services purchased as a result of this podcast does not create any type of professional relationship between you and any of the associates affiliated with this podcast. Information and statement regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.